Right, it's time for the papers now. Let's take you through the headlines across Nigeria, what the papers are saying. We have joining us to analyze all of this morning, a public affairs analyst, as usual, Ayodele Adil. Good morning and nice to see you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Very good. Now let's begin with the Punch newspaper. It's saying tenure elongation, Buhari APC governors meeting deadlocked. National Working Committee members can work in acting capacity. Governor Akeredolu is saying that. And NEC meeting not targeted at Tinubu. Lalong of Plateau State is saying that there was an emergency meeting and no one was ready to speak to the media afterwards.
Why is it so difficult for due process to have its course in Nigeria? I mean, if the constitution of your party determines a particular period in which somebody is supposed to act as the National Working Committee and that time has expired, why does it just become difficult for Nigerians to follow due process?
Politics.
I mean, I just don't get it. If you can't sort out internal politics where it's supposed to be a family affair, how can you trust those sets of people to deal with the nation in fairness and in equity? All right, so charity needs to begin at home. If your tenure has expired, I don't know why it's supposed to be a chaotic process.
Especially for a political party that made promises of upholding the tenets of democracy. It's supposed to be a
seamless transition. In fact, 3 months to the time, you should even know the likely person, you know, to take over the position.
Like
you should be seeing the signs. I mean, it should be seamless. But here you are. There's a deadlock in a meeting for something that has clearly expired. You know, and the president, I'm glad that the president has been firm on this. Yeah. He believes that there should be fresh elections, and that's the way to go.
We saw former president of Tanzania, Jakaya Kikwete, leaving office with fanfare, with everyone was celebrating. In fact, people were saying, if you can stay back, we'll give you one more term. He has done so well, and he was happy to leave office because he knows his time is due.
Exactly.
So it makes it very interesting when you know that's the time. And so you prepare your mind to leave office.
To leave office at the end of the day.
If the people say, okay, let's see what we can do. If there's a clause that say you can stay for another term, and the people say, well, we want to give you that, so be it. But in your mind, just prepare yourself to leave.
But then we have the example of Yaya Jammeh of the Gambia.
Oh, yeah, that's the other side of it. Zimbabwe is there, Mugabe.
There's a Scandinavian academic who coined, you know, an academic term called stabilocracy.
Okay.
You know, something that affects African leaders. The excuse they give for staying in office is that they want to ensure stability of their country. You know, so you have this idea
and most usually those countries are even in crisis.
Are even in crisis. You know, they tell you they want to stay in office because they want to ensure stability, you know, so they don't want to rock the party. They are the only ones who can ensure stability. And at the end of the day, they just leave the party in crisis. So this should be, again, like I say, a very seamless process. If your time has expired, you move on to other things in a very ceremonious manner.
Exactly. All right, we have one at Kogi. Governor trips, falls off his car, injures left foot. Now, this is just a normal or regular accident that can happen to anyone. But some people from the comments I was hearing yesterday were saying, well, there's some things behind. You know, an African person will always read meanings to things when they happen.
Permit us to be African for a minute. You know, traditionally, if you hit your left foot, it gives you a signal. All right. so maybe there are signs he should pay attention to at the end of the day. But, you know, I mean, I wish him quick recovery.
Yeah, exactly.
At the end of the day.
Now, federal government, World Bank discussed new lending framework, and Obasanjo not qualified to accuse anybody of corruption. Adebanjo is saying that. And then on Melaye, police arrest 6 persons for aiding suspects' escape.
You know, I mean,
and the rearrest of...
I felt slightly ashamed that I came here to pontificate on this issue last week, Wednesday, you know, and we talked about how these individuals were arrested and all of that, only for me to get home to watch network news that evening to hear that all of those suspects have escaped prison. I mean, the job you do sometimes can make you look funny because you have to review some of these things that are quite, I mean, that are quite imaginary, to say the least. How did these 6 people who you arrested and paraded, who supposedly had confessed to certain crimes that were weighty, I mean, to indict a senator who is presently sitting in the office, and suddenly they escape within 24 hours. It's laughable. We keep exposing our foot of clay before the entire world, that we're an unserious nation, that we are just the giant of Africa standing on spaghetti legs.
Wow.
And we should wake up from this slumber. It's becoming embarrassing on all fronts.
Really embarrassing.
For goodness sake.
Really embarrassing. Yeah, and we have one interesting one here. Farmers, herdsmen clashes. Buhari orders assessment of damage in Benue and others. We understand that he has set up a committee to assess the level of damage for construction purposes and so on, and reconstruction purposes.
Well, I think that the people who have been at the receiving end of this carnage, you know, deserve some level of respite from the government. They've lost properties, they've lost farmlands, they've lost their livelihoods and what have you. So, I mean, it's a step in the right direction to see how they can be adequately compensated. But for me, nipping this thing in the bud
is
the most important thing. I mean, I can't imagine that every single day you turn on the pages of our newspapers, people are dying needlessly. You now have emirs who hardly even give press conferences, coming out to shout to the rooftop that their people are dying needlessly. I mean, you had, you know, the man in Brindingwari who came out, you know, to scream that his people were dying needlessly, and then the emir in Zamfara also came out to shout, people are dying needlessly by the day. Yes. And if we don't deal with this issue, it's going to be our turn tomorrow. All right, because we keep emboldening these criminals day by day.
Okay, so we move on to the next paper, which is The Nation. The major story, Buhari urges caution as APC governors split over Oyegun. Villa meeting inconclusive. That's talking about the governor's meeting with the president. And then anxiety over predictable advisory panel. Now, the national chairman, Ojige Oyegun, set up an advisory panel to look at the stance of the president on the matter. And then people are worried, even some members are worried, because they are saying that the members of that committee are sponsors of the 10-year extension. So what do you expect them to come up with at the end of the day?
I mean, it's...
Yeah. All right, so we'll just move on to the top left of the paper. State funeral for Winnie Mandela. Well deserved.
Oh yes.
Not just
yes.
a South African icon, but an African icon.
Winnie Mandela stepped into a life she never bargained for. She, like every other young girl, you know, dreamt of an extended honeymoon, to live life, have kids, live in a fine house, drive a fine car, but she was drawn into a life of struggle, which I must say she lived with courage, with audacity, and she proved to the world that women also can stand up, women also can shout, women also can demand for justice and right. And I think she's lived a fantastic life. She's been a model to Africans all over the world, male or female. She's taught us how to stand up for what we believe in. And she's taught us to stick to those things that we believe in to the very end. Unfortunately, much as she struggled for the growth of our country, she lost the love of her life in the process. You know, she divorced with Mandela. But all the same, it's a farewell. It's a farewell. It's a ceremonious exit for an African icon.
May she rest in peace. Now, Melaye accusers get May 10 court date. That will be in Lokoja. Police seized 188 guns, others in Lagos, you know, Operation Mop-Up of illegal firearms.
How many guns again?
188 in Lagos.
You know, there's a report by the United Nations that we have about 350 million light arms circulating this country. You've seen pictures of people in Zamfara who ride on motorcycles with guns, you know, on the shoulders. You've seen herdsmen, you know, I mean, the Commissioner of Police, you know, gave a press conference where, you know, displayed hundreds of guns where he said were disarmed from herdsmen. I mean, I don't think we really understand the crisis we have found ourselves in this country, that you have 350 million light arms circulating this entire country. We're in for a real bumpy ride. And except by some stroke of genius, which I don't know how we're going to do it, to find ways of disarming these people, whether it's in Badagry where I saw guns being, you know, or in Benue where there was an amnesty program to drop guns everywhere, or it's in the Northeast. I mean, your country is just riddled with guns, and yet you still have custom officers stopping the importations of guns from our borders. So, I mean, you want to ask the question, are we in war in Nigeria? Yeah. Because the amount of guns you see everywhere on the streets is becoming worrisome.
Indeed.
For goodness sake, people need to wake up. I don't know, is it, maybe the people in the corridors of power do not see the same things that we see, do not read the news like we do. do not see the carnage that we see. There is just no sense of urgency anywhere.
But one would just
politics.
assume that that was what instructed this operation in the first place by the Inspector General of Police to mop up the illegal firearms in the system. All right, let's just move on because of time. Adebanjo, Obasanjo's presidency, a calamity. Anyoku Tinubu Kiwe eulogized statesman at 90. In fact, he described the former president as a failure, that he achieved nothing throughout his 2 terms in office as president of the country. And then the last story here, Nigeria adds to $42.6 trillion new market bank assets. And down here, Ondo Assembly sacks council chiefs. Oil prices near $70 on lowering U.S. drilling. Good to hear.
Let's move to the Daily Sun now. As meeting with President ends in deadlock, APC governors fight over Oyegun. Failed to agree on leadership crisis as party chairman gives panel 4 days to submit report. We've talked about that. Again, herdsmen, excuse me, again, herdsmen attack Enugu community. We're investigating matter. Police saying that. Buhari begins annual leave in London, April the 9th.
Oh, I mean, I don't know. But I'd just like to talk about the fact that herdsmen have attacked Enugu again. There just doesn't seem to be a clearly articulated strategy to nip this in the bud.
At least now we've not seen anything yet.
Yeah, exactly. I think we are being totally responsive to these incidences, that an attack happens in the community, the police comes in, and then, you know, actually what we're doing is to take census of people who die and census of buildings that have gotten burned. So your security apparatus have become people who take census. We just come, examine what happens, and then we give press conferences, and then we dispute the amount of people who have died.
And then we decide how to compensate those who need to be compensated.
I mean, people are dying every single day, for goodness sake. And I tell you, sincerely speaking, with what I see, it's only going to get worse, because you need to look at the borders that surround our country. You need to look at countries like Chad, Niger, and look at the human development indexes of these countries. They are 181, 182, 183 in the global Human Development Index ranking out of 186 countries. So technically, the states that are surrounding us are in mere collapse. These people are going to rush into your country because they want greener pastures. And they are doing that every single day. They come in their droves. Yesterday, I saw, I don't know what they call them, Operation Immigration or whatever. They were picking people in my area who were fetching water, who were riding bikes, who they say were not citizens of this country. And you can imagine what happened. They settled them with 3,000 naira, 4,000 naira, and then they are left to go back into the system. So you see, you have a serious crisis in your hands where there is a complicity from the immigration service to the people who are mounting the borders, to the inability for your internal security apparatus to contain the peace in the land. And I'm just afraid that our country is weakening by the day. We do not want to get to a situation where we're going to offend another country, because I doubt if Nigeria can resist.
That was why the gendarmeries from Cameroon invaded Nigeria at the border with Cross River. Exactly. The residents then complained. Nothing happened.
So we've got that report so many times.
Nothing was done.
Even from the days of Bakassi and all of that.
Then we have
Knox kudos for Obasanjo over attack on president, and gunmen invade Kogi police station, killed 2 policemen. Police rearrest escaped suspects to arraign Melaye, others May the 10th. And then looters list, federal government has no case against us, PDP.
This is some sort of jamboree. I tell you, every time we're treated to this theater of the absurd, where it's a Tadi Ogindo production. We keep on watching every now and then. You know, my thief is bigger than your thief is not my thief at the end of the day. And so I just don't know when this is going to end and when we're going to focus on the substance of real governance, at the end of the day. If you accuse people of corruption and you put their names on the list and they are not facing prosecution, then that also indicts the very government who is claiming to be fighting those corruption, because you're pointing one finger and no one is pointing right back at you.
And if you have people that are facing corruption trials and yet their names are not on the list.
On the list. I mean, so it's just really confusing. But for me, let's just move away from the shenanigans and deal with the issues of governance. People need food on their table. The economy needs to do better. We need to create more jobs for people. I don't care of your corruption list if 7.2 million people have lost their jobs in 3 years. What I want to see is an economy that creates more jobs for the Nigerian people. I want to see a country or a government that secures the lives and property of Nigerian people, and not show me a list of corrupt people that makes no difference to me or makes no meaning to me whatsoever.
All right, let's quickly go to the last paper this day. The major story here, uncertainty over Oyegun's future as APC governors meeting with Buhari deadlocked. Presidency, others root for Oshiomhole to lead party. That is getting clearer. Lalong heads panel to resolve tenure extension quagmire. We talked about that. We go now to a top of the major story. Nwabweze backs Danjuma, insists Nigerians have constitutional right to self-defense, asks president to rein in killer herdsmen.
Oh yes, nobody's disputing the fact that people have a constitutional right to defend themselves. I think the issue was people felt, that the former chief of army staff shouldn't have openly indicted the Nigerian army in the way that he did, and what have you. But at the end of the day, like I always like to tell people, the problem really is not the statements people like Danjuma make. The problem is the inability of the Nigerian police or the Nigerian internal security apparatus to keep the peace in the land. If you do your job diligently and you ensure that your life and my life is protected, people like Danjuma will not make the kind of statements that they make at the end of the day. So for me, you have to fix the problem first. And the major problem is that people are dying needlessly every single day in our country. And that's what you should focus on, and that's what you should deal with decisively.
All right. NHIS boss in another controversy ignores TSA, moves to invest 25 billion naira in FGN bonds.
Yeah, I mean, when I saw that report, I just chuckled. And I said to myself, obviously, they are probably sacred cows, in certain places that, could do what they want to do because they have the ears of certain people. So, I mean, if you could recall him back without, the buying of the minister who actually, ensured his sack or his firing or his prosecution or whatever.
Or was reinstated.
Or reinstated or whatever. You are going to have things like that because what he also emboldens him to also take decisions without, the input of the minister at the end of the day. So I think, like the Nation's editorial, once argued, that there seems to be an institutional impunity around where there is no organization, at the highest level of government. I do think that there needs to be some level of coherence. Somebody needs to be able to sit, probably as the chief of staff of the SSG, to really get some organization in this government and ensure that things that go out are carefully coordinated at the end of the day.
In all of those, someone is still going to say it boils down to, or boils down back to the body language of the president. Now, the SSG or the chief of staff, they're all there working for the president. And the authority doesn't come from them. The final authority comes from the president. And when someone can blatantly say, I'm not answerable to you, even though you're supposed to be under his ministry, you're just a parastatal, you tell your boss administratively, I'm not answerable to you. He tells you.
And true to his words, he was reinstated by the president when he came back to the country.
All of those Nigerians are watching.
I mean, I can understand, but really, I mean, I've been trying to ask who the president's special senior advisor is on political affairs. Somebody who sits and looks at the political terrain and advises Mr. President on the steps to take or not take, on the consequences of certain actions in the country. Somebody needs to be telling Mr. President that, Oga, I know this intention, I know you see these things in this direction, but please, let's not go in this direction because it has X, Y, Z consequences. That's why you need a special senior assistant on political affairs, and that's where you need your chief of staff. Listen, there are certain positions that you occupy that you need to stand your ground, because at the end of the day, it makes your government look bad and it makes your principle look bad. Sometimes you need to argue it in the room and take the hard bullets in the room and ensure that your government looks better on the outside.
Okay, Ayodele Adio, thank you very much for your analysis at this time. Of course, looking at the papers with us this morning. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.